Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about just being less dogmatic at times in our pursuit of maximum strength, because a lot of people have noticed that with me again this year, that I've kind of set aside some of my dogmatic beliefs, and I've actually generally been not that dogmatic. It's just that there's some stuff that I always think is going to be nonsense. But the point is that I'm open to a lot of different things in terms of training. And I don't mean of just trying random stupid stuff, but looking at what various champions and coaches around the world at different elite levels in strength sports and in maximum strength and conditioning do with their athletes, and being open to these ideas if they make sense. Meaning, if something is just really bro and it doesn't make a lot of sense, but just because someone said, "Hey, I did this and it worked, bro," that's not good enough. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have certain rules in place, because we need to understand that we do have specificity of training. We do have things like maximum recoverable volume. We do have things like minimum effective volume. Strength curves matter. Joint angle specificity matters. But outside of the context of that, we can't be so dogmatic about different things that we don't use different approaches that some of the best coaches and athletes in the world utilize. And the difference between the strength world, and we have to separate this from the bodybuilding world, is that what a lot of people have to understand when we talk about a lot of this dogma in the bodybuilding world, it is literally because the excessive drug abuse in the bodybuilding world not only allows them to train in pretty bizarre ways, sometimes the actual side effects of the substances and combination of things they use, or the physical pain that they have in certain regions of their body from repeatedly injecting it over and over and over, affects the way that they can train, to the point of where they can't always train effectively. Right? So you're dealing with a different scenario there. And I'm not saying drug abuse isn't rampant in the strength world, because it is, at least anabolics, but not all the other stuff. But we still have rules in play. And what you find is that a lot of times in the strength world is that the training can be very, very similar for a drug-free champion and a enhanced champion. So we are dealing with a different scenario, but I will say that we can't set that factor aside. And the first example I would give you is obviously really, really low frequency training. Right? That is generally not going to work. That's not going to work without abusing copious amounts of substances, at least trying to get to very serious levels. And you guys know what I mean, where, if you train only 3 days a week and you have a bench day and a squat day and a deadlift day, that's sort of low frequency. And there are guys who do it that way, but if you look at their drug stacks, they're ridiculous. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about looking at all these different things and saying, hey, what can I do different with my periodization? Or the perfect example, me coming back and realizing that, sumo deadlifts work. In fact, from certain training modalities are superior. I was dogmatic about that. That's a perfect example. Conventional deadlift all the way. Why? Because it's tradition. Because it's tradition. And sumo is for cheaters. But the reality is there's a pretty good amount of mounting evidence that the sumo has its own benefits from an actual training economy perspective. We get into all the accommodating resistance. And sometimes there are times when I mess with it, someone felt like I didn't get the results I wanted. But we look back and realize it was my application of the methods, not the methods, that was flawed. Because realistically, at the end of the day, if utilized correctly, bands and chains bring an enormous amount of things to the table. Each one of them actually have individual things that they bring, and they bring more than one thing to the table. Now, if you're not careful, can you lose some specificity of training? Sure. But heavy lifting is still heavy lifting from a strength perspective, right? And everything else can be filled in with accessory work and assistance work. And that's one of the things that I've been resistant to in the last few years. And it's mainly because I always tried to push a minimalist style of training, because I think the majority of people out there would benefit from some minimalism. I think they get inundated with excessive exercise variation and stuff at a level to where they're not going to benefit from it. And I feel like if it makes you neglect your classic lifts, that's a problem. right? In other words, if people have you on a leg press and leg extensions all the time and you don't ever squat, that's my problem with stuff. It's staying away from lifts that actually make the most difference to pursue all the fluff. But do different accessory movements in the right environment bring a lot to the table? Absolutely. In fact, I'd say to the point to where they're essential at a certain level. They're absolutely essential, even for maximizing strength. For maximizing strength. They really are. Because they allow you to fill in all your weak links. They allow you to get more training volume in, because that's the one downside to any sort of minimalist training, is that it forces you into limiting training volume, because you can't come in and do endless sets of squats and deadlifts and everything else and recover, at least without getting hurt. So these exercises, the big movements that are the foundation of your training, and the exercises that give you the most bang for your buck, we also can't do limitless amounts of those. And it's a lot of times I've always said to people, all these exercises move your body through space. They give the best training effect. They do. Exercises where you're standing, they give you the best training effect. They do. The problem we get to is the recovery end. Some of the best exercises that are your foundational exercises, we also are very limited in our total training loads per day and per week that we can do with them. All right, that's a problem if we're trying to get as jacked and as strong as possible, because we have to use fairly high volumes of training. We have to use multiple training modalities. And we can't be dogmatic about that. And I've even learned to accept that there's situations to where even messing with some machines for weak point training could help a person get maximally strong. Now, should they be the foundation of your training? Of course not. But if you didn't have the other equipment to do it, is that a viable option? Sure, if that's what you have available. Right? If you don't have a way to do chest-supported barbell rows and you can't handle any more axial loading, you know what? Maybe a low row hammer strength machine isn't the worst thing in the world you could be doing. In fact, it might be beneficial. If you don't have access to a glute ham raise, and let's go over to the point. I'll be dogmatic. You need a glute ham raise. If you do not have a glute ham raise at your gym, you need to join a gym that has one, or you need to buy one to have in your home. I'll be dogmatic with that. I think it's an almost irreplaceable piece of equipment at this point. If you do not have access to one, though, could some standing leg curls, and notice I said standing, could that be viable for a while? Is that a beneficial exercise? Yeah, especially if you don't want to risk tearing a hamstring. Because hip hinges do not work all three heads of the hamstring. They only work two of them directly. You only get radiant effect on the third. So this is what I mean about not being dogmatic. As much as I might think machines, and I would push people away from machines because I feel like bodybuilders have pushed excessive amounts of machine work. And you have too many noobs who don't have real weak point training who are trying to build everything off machines, and then they end up being weak with all sorts of muscle imbalances and everything else. All right, that's a problem. But does it mean that in a proper balanced training program that machines can't have some benefits? If someone doesn't have any way to do hip belt squats and they have a quad weakness, is a machine hack squat the worst thing in the world? Probably not. It might be beneficial. It'd still be better than a leg press, wouldn't it? Yeah. Machine hack squat, it might be acceptable. It might be acceptable for a quad weakness. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Understanding the value of certain training modalities. Understanding that things like bands and chains and some of these exercise variations have a lot of value if used correctly. I don't mean just doing random silly shit. I mean structured, correct application of these things. They can work. Can machines even, and I'm generally anti-machine, can machines play a role if utilized correctly as an accessory movement? Can they be a useful tool in maximizing strength, maximizing your general jactitude? Yeah, they can be. Wouldn't be my first option, but they could have a place. And that's what it comes down to. So I'm saying it's you don't want to be overly dogmatic. It doesn't mean that you need to do stupid stuff. It doesn't mean that you need to do random stuff. But we come over to the other point. If something has value as a tool, and it seems to be a good tool for you at that place in your training, and it can flow with the structure of your overall training, don't discard it outright, is all that I'm saying. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.